Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm excited to introduce our next panel on urban farming and environmental justice. My name is Leah Atwood. I am an urban farmer, mostly goat shepherdess these days, and also one of the co-program directors at Mesa. So I'm super excited to introduce this amazing panel of knowledgeable women today. We have Estève Giraud, and I'll read everyone's bios. Estève is a second-year PhD student at the School of Sustainability at Arizona State. Her dissertation research focuses on urban agriculture grassroots initiatives for self-sufficiency and their transformative potential to promote values of social and environmental care. She conducted part of her field research in summer 2018 in Havana, Cuba. She holds a master's in economics from University Pompeu in Spain and a master's in business administration from Toulouse Business School in France. And she's passionate about food studies and permaculture and has participated in local ag initiatives in France, Egypt, India, Australia, and Spain. So thank you so much for coming, Estève. And second, we have Martha Ayon. And Martha is an indigenous foodways activist whose work focuses on the preservation of Mesoamerican ancestral foods and cooking techniques. Born to parents who migrated from their homelands, what is today considered Tala in the colonial state of Jalisco, Mexico, she identifies with her Perpetua roots and continues to uncover her lineages that were violently erased. Some of her favorite traditional dishes and beverages to prepare include pozole, blue corn tacos, and chocolate. In response to the colonial impacts on indigenous foodways, her current projects include seed keeping, building with adobe, and creating indigenous-based and alternative economics. Current collaborators include Black and Red Autonomous Cooperative and Red Earth Ovens. Her alternative education includes various modalities such as ceremony, travel, and speaking with elders, involvement in community spaces, Zapotec, and certified indigenous design programs. So thank you so much for coming, Martha. And then next we have Haleh Zandi. And Haleh is a mother, land-based activist, and co-founder and director at Planting Justice. Planting Justice is an Oakland-based nonprofit that has a 4-acre food forest in El Sobrante, a 2-acre commercial plant nursery in Oakland, and a landscaping service, a grassroots fundraising program, and leads educational workshops at schools, sites of incarceration, and with community organizations throughout Ohlone territory. For the past 10 years, Haleh's been organizing across prison walls to support people impacted by mass incarceration as they return home to community. Haleh's approach towards food sovereignty draws on critical connections between the U.S. dependence on fossil fuels within the modern colonial food system and the unjust U.S. militarization of the Middle East. And then prior to funding PJ, Haleh worked for Peace Action West in Berkeley and with the Women of Color Resource Center in Oakland. So thank you for coming, Haleh. And then we're very excited to have Minkah Taharkah as an earthworker with Blackearth Farm Collective, where her main focus, besides land stewardship, include teaching yoga and mindfulness meditation. Through her experience in visual and graphic arts, she creates photographic content to highlight and critique gentrification and environmental injustices in South LA, the East Bay, Ghana, and Costa Rica, highlighting the work and lives of small farmers. So thank you so much. We're so excited to hear from you all. It's an honor to have you, and I will pass it off to Estève.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leah. And thank you, everyone, for still being here right now, just before lunch. It's a great honor to be part of such an amazing panel speaker today and to be speaking in front of you. I've really enjoyed the conference so far. It's been really inspiring. Especially right now, I'm 6 months pregnant, and I'm thinking, well, what is this world, that we're gonna have for this child? And I hear you guys talk, and I look at all the initiatives, and it gives me a lot of hope. So thank you really for that. So my name is Estève. I am from France originally, and I now live in Phoenix in Arizona. And my research in my third year of the PhD is on food systems, and especially on urban agriculture. And it all started with this initiative. I don't know if you can see really well, but it's the picture in the background. These are raised beds that are in cities with food to share. The whole concept was, let's plant things, let's make it free, and let's take care of this little space. Let's reinvent our urban spaces so that people can actually have access to food in a way that is free and that is disturbing their normal interaction with the space. And then I thought, how cool is that, you know? And then they started doing this in the UK. It was a movement called Incredible Edible. And then it came to France, and this is where I met them. And the results that they were having were really fascinating. So by doing this, just this simple thing of planting food in the public space, it's starting spurring conversation on food. Where does it come from? How do we cook this? You know, a lot of vegetables in some cities that were kind of, in some part of cities anyways, that were food deserts. So people were really used to big supermarkets and they didn't really know much about vegetables. So these initiatives really encouraged them. And little by little, the crime level dropped in the cities, communities were recreated, the city officials started taking the initiatives and then also using public parks to plant, and the whole culture of the town completely shifted. And so I thought, wow, urban agriculture really holds such a huge power. There's so much we could do. And so this is how came my research question. Can urban agriculture make us more caring? So why caring? Well, some of you are probably familiar with this. It's permaculture, 3 ethics. It's the 3 pillars are earth care, so caring for all of the earth and the natural environment. People care, so caring for each other, for ourselves and for our communities. And fair share, so not being greedy, taking only what we need, not taking more from nature and from each other or from ourselves than what is needed. But what we talk a lot about, you know, environmental care and all these things, but what does it really mean? What exactly does it mean? And so feminists have been thinking about this for a while, and ecofeminists, and there's one her name is John Toronto. She's been doing this division back in the 90s, explaining how there are different stages, different phases of caring. So I can care about something, but really not do anything about it. Let's say I care about the Amazon, but at the end of the day, I don't do anything about it, and I don't even think I have a responsibility about it. That's caring about. And then there's caring for, which is when I start recognizing that I might have a responsibility to do something. And so maybe, you know, I can be an agent. And then there's the actual caregiving. So there's this need that is there and actually give the care. And this is the labor of care. This is when you actually go and farm and you just not say, well, I have a responsibility to do something. No, I actually farm. I actually, you know, recycle. I actually take care of my children and wipe their butt. You know, I actually do the care, not just care about them in theory. And then care receiving, which is really important, it's the feedback loop, is showing that you're actually doing the care right. Because if I say, okay, I care about the environment, I'm going to be using this specific agriculture technique that is going to be, in theory, good for the environment. But there's no return, the land actually gets worse and worse and worse, then I'm not being really caring, right? So there's something that is broken there. So that's something to pay attention to. So now I'm going to show you a series of pictures, and I'm asking you to reflect if this is caring for you. So I won't ask you to just answer because there are too many people, but just think internally if this is caring. So what about that? You see a plain spraying pesticides on crops. Is this caring? What about this? So we're cows, and there are two people in the back, and then the cows are getting milked. What about this? So this strawberry field, and you see a lot of people to harvest. Is that caring? Are they caring for the land right now? Are they being cared for as farm workers? What about this? So this is a permaculture setting. This is in an urban space, actually, even if you can't really see from the picture. So it's planting lettuce and using this technique with the mulching. What about this? This is hydroponic. It's using only nutrient-based solution to grow intensively. This is in the Netherlands. It's a greenhouse. So is this caring? And this is a space on a train station where they, again, inviting people to help themselves to pick up herbs that they've planted themselves and they've been, grooming and taking care of. So is this caring? All right. So here we have different answers, and people roughly, I think in similar patterns because we share a lot of values. But really, we all have biases. I've run this test with several people, and usually some pictures people don't always agree with. For instance, the hydroponics, some people say, yeah, this is super caring because it used very little chemical entrance. So there we have biases, all of us. And part of what brought us today in terms of having such degraded agricultural spaces, I think, is because we have not really embraced these biases in the way we manage land and we farm. What do I mean by that? So this is a big slide, but I'm going to try to really explain properly. So we are assuming that the policy and the politics is morally neutral. There's this general assumption. And this comes from the 18th century, where really we had this idea of human beings being individual, autonomous, and separate from each other, and we have free agents that we need to regulate. So the role of the state and the role of the state in agricultural policy is to distribute rights and to just be a kind of a referee and not to really engage. To say there's no morality there, we don't care about morality, we just need to make sure that people's rights are distributed more or less fairly and that the economic game is working for everyone. But there are some problematic assumptions with that. One is that, okay, but what does that tell us about the rights of nature? What does that tell us about the right of communities? Because then it's not about just one free agent or several free agents, but it's about their relationship. And same with nature. Nature is something that we are in a relationship with continuously, and we cannot just treat it as a resource. So the assumptions there is that we are autonomous and irrelated individuals, but really maybe our nature is to be intrinsically relational. For instance, we are born, we're fragile, we need a lot of care before we can be autonomous. We get sick, we need a lot of help. We get old, we need a lot of help. And all throughout our lives, we're embedded in this mesh of connections that need to be valued and are extremely important, even at the political level, to be taken into account, because these are the foundation of morality. So in the 80s and 90s, but actually way before, all the indigenous people had been telling us that for a very long time. But in the West, in the Western thinking, it's really with the 80s and 90s that women thinkers started saying, okay, we are devaluing care completely. Caring about the things I was referring at the beginning is fine. Caring about is okay. Caregiving, though, caregiving is it's very unpaid, usually. Think about the caregivers, how much they are paid compared to, a banker, for instance, right? So these are very devalued tasks, or even women's labor in reproduction, they're not really necessarily valued. I mean, they're still not paid leave for women in this country at the federal level. So we need to include that in our food systems. We need to include the fact that we are embedded creatures, we need to acknowledge for our feelings and how our feelings are actually very important in shaping policy, and that it's not something we should disengage from systematically, it's something actually we should embrace because they're telling us something. And we need to be attentive. Thank you. We need to be attentive. Like there's a relationship that is between us and the other, us and the environment, and for those of you who farm or take care of other, there is this attentiveness, this responsiveness that is required to provide good care. So a policy of care at the political level, really, it's something that defines role which makes caring situations more likely to occur. So we define role, instead of just being distributing rights and just staying it aside and saying what happens, no, we actually want to create situations in which caring needs to happen. Why? Because the more we have situations that we have to care for, then the more caring we become. And urban agriculture has the potential to do that. So I'm out of time, so I'm just going to go very quickly here. These are the people I've been following in France. They started this, and then in 3 years only, the initiative was in 800 cities and in 60 countries. So more and more and more people started embracing it. And so you see here on the top, they're planting in the most random places. You don't need a lot of land necessarily to farm. You can start farming wherever you are. And then they came up with this, which is a 21 action program step that shows that can be reproduced in different cities and adapted to the local context. And it's using permits, licenses to greenify the space and with edibles. It's using seed banks. It's using workshops for our food preservation. It's using very different initiatives like this that can be adapted everywhere, and to help create this conversation at the urban level to spur, to encourage this caring aspect within us. So yeah, there is a symbiotic relationship in urban food systems between care and autonomy. And yeah, we just need to organize ourselves so that this can be developed. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So, I'm sorry? Yeah. Cool. Hello, everybody. Thank you for introducing us, Leah. Great job. So, as Leah mentioned, my name is Martha, and I was born and raised in Los Angeles. This picture right here is overlooking downtown from the east side. So, I'm originally from a part that is called Taula, Teochitlan. That's where my family originates, and that's a Nahuatl-speaking people as well as Purepecha. So those are the roots that I choose to identify with in the face of course, colonialism and the colonial violence that has erased our identities. So this right here is going to be talking about the urban farming projects that we have in Los Angeles. So that right there is a picture of Mexico, kind of denoting the region of what it actually looks like today. On the top right-hand corner, those are the relics of what was left behind from our ancestors. So it's a very clear indication of where we come from and who we are. This over here, of course, is Los Angeles, a very different makeout. You can see right away that it's a very urban setting, a concrete jungle, not as many lakes, natural rivers, mountains, clean air. And these are pictures right here of Boyle Heights. So Boyle Heights is a metropolitan area in Los Angeles. It's located on the east side. So it recently has been hit by a lot of gentrification. On the top right-hand corner over there, those are the mariacheros, the people who play mariachis. they were actually on a rent strike in that photo. So it's a very political town because, of course, aside from all the beauty, the culture, the food, the music, the richness, the celebration of it, we're also experiencing a lot of police brutality, forced displacement, so on and so forth. So this right here are a couple of pictures of the recent protests that we have had in Boyle Heights. Boyle Heights is made up of primarily Mexican, as we would say today, Mexican community, so both migrants and people who already were born here, such as myself. So these are just kind of like giving you a background of the type of life that we have in LA and Boyle Heights, because it's very different from the Hollywood depiction that a lot of people like to think about. You know, yes, there's beautiful beaches, but you have downtown LA, luxury condos located right next to Skid Row. Skid Row, if you're not familiar with it, is a large homeless encampment where it's, you know, just kind of like the wild, wild west, and police, of course, are right next to Skid Row, but they're not doing anything about it because they just kind of like turn their heads on all of these social problems that we have. So it's kind of up to us a lot of times to come in and fix those problems. This right here is a community garden. It was formerly known as Proyecto Jardín before kind of like the ownership went haywire. So this was actually a couple years ago. This was a very prominent community space within Boyle Heights. And here it was not just a community garden, but it was also a network of folks who were in the community that were danzantes, as you see in the picture right here. So those right there, of course, are the traditional Mexica dancers, or more commonly known, the Aztec dancers. And you also have, of course, the elders there, the children, the babies. You have the whole generation there. You don't have just one face or one audience, because we always are rooted in community, and we're rooted in the values that were left behind to us by our ancestors. So that right there is my home garden. This was when I planted corn. I really like these pictures, of course, because they show kind of like the symbol, you know, of what Mesoamerica kind of represents. And it was a really awesome experience, of course, because of crop rotation. I've grown a couple other things since then. And the community space that I primarily wanted to focus on today is called Zapotepec. So Zapotepec is a community, an agricultural autonomous community based in East Los Angeles, which is in the same proximity of East LA and Boyle Heights. So this right here are a couple of pictures of the different aspects that we like to focus on in Zapotepec. So of course we have the fire in the middle right there. That right there is a traditional fire pit, and as you can see, the soil there is very clayous, and that has helped us out immensely in terms of the natural adobe building, because there's also an horno, there's a temazcal, which is a traditional bathhouse, along with a couple other pottery pieces that folks have made. So the resources that are already in the land right there have lended themselves immensely for us to move forward with the building that we have been doing. And of course, the soil has not been very fertile because the soil in LA is just not, you know, arable, fertile soil that you would see perhaps in like volcanic lands, like my homelands. So it's been a lot of work over the years, and we've had to plant and do cover cropping and just very intensive, all natural farming techniques that have brought us to a state where our soil is getting better. And that's, of course, not even mentioning the environmental injustices that are going on within Los Angeles, that are going on within proximity to our neighborhoods. So not too long ago, there was actually the Exide plant that was polluting the area, and there have been a couple of sites as far as like the pollution and like the lead levels that have to be completely removed because of the contamination, because it's so bad. So luckily, you know, not all of the sites are infested that way, but the ones that are, of course, we cannot plant in. So this right here is a picture of the temazcal. This is a traditional bathhouse, and as you can see right there, it's made with adobe. So everything that is seen right here is a natural material. So most of it was sourced by our hands in the earth, but we also have, for example, cedar wood inside of it. So inside and in the rims, you need kind of like a doorway, something to sustain it. So you do have to use a couple of different materials that are readily available at the store, but if needed, you can make it 100% natural materials. This is a picture of one of the parts in the middle. So these are a couple of just kind of fields right here. You can see the terraces in the back, and the passion fruit is actually covering the raised bed in the background right there. But generally, we do like to focus on Mesoamerican fruits and vegetables. So there's a lot of different varieties that we have within Zapotepec that are not found, for example, in grocery stores. A couple to name is a couple of fruits like guamuchiles, arrayanes. Those are fruits that come from, of course, more like central Mexico. So they don't really get planted up here unless you secretly bring a seed from Mexico and plant it over here, which is what we have done. Of course, it would be much better if we didn't have those restrictions on migrating seeds, because just as we have migrated, our seeds have migrated too. And this has been since time immemorial that people take their seeds with them. So that's what we have right here. We do plant corn, squash, beans, the Three Sisters, different types of chiles and tomatoes, all the good stuff. And everything, of course, is with the end point of nourishing ourselves and our community. So what does nourishing mean? Does it mean buying all organic or vegan food? It could. But what we are trying to get to here is that if you eat what your ancestors ate, that's your health right there. That's what will nourish your body. There have actually been recent studies done. One of the really awesome experiences that I got to look into was the Pueblo food experience, which was a group of a couple of Pueblo members out in New Mexico who documented their progress when they changed their diet. So they got lab results, doctors, physical exams done before and after changing their diet, and the results were incredible. They lost weight, cholesterol went away, the high blood pressure, all of that went away for the elders. It was a really amazing testimony. So it was really cool to see all of that and to also share with them what we have. So just a couple things right here. This is the wood burning stove on the left. We also have the molcajete right there up top. The cempasúchil, another symbol, prominent symbol, and of course the adobe oven right there. These are a couple of different things that we've harvested over the months. So squash, tomatillos, beets, potatoes, and we also, of course, have had to start our own seed bank. So because we want to preserve our foodways, we do want to also have a well-documented way of doing so. So we started a seed bank about 2-3 years ago, and we've been continuing that initiative.
1 minute.
And we also, of course, use it as a place for alternative education. So as you can see right here, these are a couple of different dishes that we use throughout the time that we have right there in order to homeschool the children as well. So the children right there also are very hands-on in that process. That right there, so you have a couple different ingredients right there that I mentioned before, like the squash blossom up top, the rajas, which is a chile, the corn, huitlacoche, which are other Mesoamerican foods, traditional foods. This right there is the cacao beans that we really treasure, and I actually brought some with me today, so if you catch me on my downtime, I can totally show it to you, and it smells super amazing. And we also hold a lot of different community events and are involved in different community events. So we have a cook-off, we also have a native games tournament, we have a conference at the end of each year, that picture right there. And this is, of course, our co-op, as was mentioned in the bio. So if you look our co-op up, Black and Red Autonomous Co-op, you can look at the ways that we're rebuilding our autonomy in terms of economics as well. So that right there is another collaborator, Red Earth Ovens. If you or anybody that you are interested in are looking for an Adobe oven, definitely look that way. And it's all, of course, in effort to preserve our indigenous foodways. Thank you.
Pictures made me hungry. It looks good.
Oh, I was asked to make a comment, a clarification, that the Exide plant was a recycled battery plant. So it's a really terrible corporation that basically polluted a large portion of the east side of LA, which is mainly impoverished communities of color. Thank you for that.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I feel really blessed to be in the room with you all and that we're all here and together. It's special. So Planting Justice is a nonprofit that's been around for 10 years. And the mission of Planting Justice is to empower people impacted by mass incarceration and other social inequalities with the skills and resources to cultivate food sovereignty, economic justice, and community healing. So we're really working at the intersection of food sovereignty and economic justice. For the past 10 years, I've been working at San Quentin State Prison, and we have been creating jobs for people returning home from incarceration at an entry-level wage of $17.50 an hour. And so our staff has grown in the past 10 years to more than 35 of us full-time. And this is in several different programs. So our programs are really integrated, and they support each other in really important ways. So we have a landscaping service. We've built over 500 gardens in the Bay Area for both full-paying clients, and we've subsidized about a quarter of those gardens for free for low-income households and communities. We run a 2-acre nursery in the Sobrani Park neighborhood of East Oakland, and that's where the majority of our staff work. We have about 13 or so folks who work full-time there, taking care of baby plants, potting them up, taking cuttings, shipping these plants across the country. And that's Rolling River Nursery was a family-run business. It's the that we acquired 3 years ago. And it's the largest collection of certified organic tree crops in North America. So you can order plants online and we'll ship them right to your door. We also operate a 4-acre farm in El Sobrante, which is uphill from Richmond off the Hilltop exit. And that 4-acre farm has had trees there, planted there for about 3 years now. So they're almost ready to be fruiting and being distributed into the community. And we've planted every variety that we have in our collection. So every winter when we prune, we send all that wood material to the nursery and all of them become baby plants. So, and then for the past 10 years, I've been working in the education program. So we partner with the Oakland Unified School District, mostly high schools like Dewey, McClymonds, and we build gardens on campus with the students. We teach them we bring the wood, the soil, and they use all the power tools and such to build it. And then we return every week. We make smoothies together. We talk about nutrition. We talk about food sovereignty movements, the legacies of the Panthers, the United Farm Workers, and what kind of struggles our students are facing in the community and how food sovereignty movements can really empower them. And then we run a grassroots canvas program. So if you ever see someone on the street with a clipboard and they ask you to stop and talk to them, please be kind and talk to them. They are raising donations, getting new landscaping clients, just doing grassroots community organizing and having those face-to-face conversations about prison abolition or about economic justice. And so I just wanted to give you an overview of all those programs, and I think I shared them all. And particularly at the nursery in East Oakland, we're in partnership with Sigoriate Land Trust. So I encourage you to look up the Sigoriate Land Trust online. It's run by urban indigenous women, founded by Karina Gould and Janella LaRose. And they have something called a She'umi land tax, which is a voluntary tax that residents of the Bay Area can opt into paying every year in recognition of the legacies of colonialism. And they've recently built an arbor, a ceremonial arbor, which is the first ceremonial arbor on Ohlone territory since the missionization period in California, which is taught in our public schools not as genocide and slavery, but really was a history of genocide and slavery that was funded by the California government. So I encourage you to support Sigoriate as well. Let's see, I personally got into this work through my anti-war organizing. My family is from Iran. My dad is one of the few family members who came here in 1978. And oil and the fossil fuel industry has had incredibly negative impacts on my family. And my mom's side of the family my mom was born and raised in California, but she's of Norwegian heritage, and her family came down the Pacific Northwest cutting trees along the way. They were loggers. So I feel this soil not oil concept is really close to my heart. And when I was organizing to prevent war with Iran after 9/11, which is still at risk today, but also to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I was feeling really frustrated by the strategies of the anti-war movement, whether it's asking Congress to end war, which they're so entrenched in and invested in the military-industrial complex, or protests or marches, and the way that the movement centered veterans rather than centering the folks who are most impacted by militarism, which is immigrants and people who are living in countries that are militarized. I felt really frustrated, and I remember listening to an interview of a woman who came from Southeast Asia after the US war in Vietnam, and when she tasted the conventional produce grown in California, the chemicals in her mouth that she felt was reminiscent of the chemical weapons she was exposed to in Southeast Asia in the refugee camp. And when I started to look a little bit more, I read through Wendell Berry that after World War II, the munitions industry funneled ammonium nitrates, the ingredient used to make bombs, into the agricultural industry. And it's the same chemical that we use to make bombs is the same chemical we're spraying on our food. And so I began to explore more about how food is like a slow and violent warfare on our bodies, and how a more local and sustainable food system, especially in the US that really leads this modern colonial food system that's globalized and industrialized, if we were to have a more local and globalized food system, it would really alleviate our dependence on fossil fuels and our need to militarize the Middle East. So I still consider my urban agricultural work to be my anti-war activism. And so I just wanted to tell a little bit more about the underlying organizational structure of Planting Justice. So it's been increasingly important, not only that we generate income, which happens in our landscaping program, our nursery, eventually in our farm after 3 years of investment, and our canvassing. So it's really important that we generate income and we're not dependent upon grants and foundations. We are really grateful for the grants and foundations we have received, including from the USDA, which is a direct result of the Pigford settlements, which created, the Pigford settlements was a court case that was won by African American farmers who had experienced decades of discrimination, and after many years they were able to prove that went all the way to the Supreme Court, I believe, and they were awarded millions of dollars, but also there was created a pot of fund that would support anything that's not, those 5 main crops. What is it? Cotton, corn, rice, soy, and wheat. So those are called specialty crops. Anything that's not those 5 crops are called specialty crops. So we do still bring in income from grants as a nonprofit, but it's been increasingly important to create a more equitable organization and to develop more transparency within the organization and to have more democratic practices. So in the past 3 years, we've implemented a leadership council that's elected, where programs send elected representatives to the council. The council meets every 5 weeks and reviews major funding decisions, reviews accountability. We created a peace council that manages conflict on staff, and it's not seeking out conflict, but is a resource that's trained in restorative justice and other conflict resolution practices. We created a transparent pay chart so that everyone's pay is determined by the same mechanisms, and it's all clearly outlined in the chart. Everyone comes in year 1 at the same rate, and everyone gets annual increases of 3%, and there are some bump ups that the staff voted on, including single parents and parents with children under the age of 5 for childcare stipends, and for folks who are formerly incarcerated who have been incarcerated for more than 3 years but have remained on staff for 3 years. They get a bump up in their pay to recognize the opportunities that they missed out on while being incarcerated. And a transparent decision-making chart that outlines every decision that is made in the organization, who makes it, who they have to get input from, and who they need to inform once they've made that decision. So we're trying to really, and we've done this in partnership with the Sustainable Economies Law Center through the Nonprofit Democracy Network, but it's been really important to find ways to build equity in the organization through transparency. And so about 1/3 of our staff is formerly incarcerated, and our staff members who are formerly incarcerated are mentors at our high school and educators at our high school campus, and so they're coming from similar backgrounds and able to be really important mentors to our students who are facing so many challenges, especially in the continuation high schools. And they've also been cleared to return to teach at San Quentin and now at Maple Street Jail. We're teaching twice a week at Maple Street Jail. And we have formerly incarcerated staff members who are the lead educators there. And this will be the last thing to finish up. Just last month at Maple Street Jail, we planted over 100 fruiting trees, berries, and medicinal herbs right outside the facilities that the men and women who participate in our program are going to be able to use in their culinary program. It's not about greening the prisons. It's not about legitimizing carceral technologies as a form of punishment, but about building the solutions that we need and the alternatives that we need towards abolishing the prison system or the whole method of enslaving people, which is what our prison systems are. So please reach out to us and come visit us at the nursery, 319 105th Avenue, open Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Come purchase your plants there. We're open all winter, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Minkah. I'm with Blackearth Farm Collective, which basically we started this year in January, so we're pretty new, but we've been pushing through. To begin, I'd like to first make a land acknowledgement that we are on stolen land. Here in San Francisco in particular, we're on indigenous Yalamu land, which was populated by around the Mission Creek area. Where Blackearth Farms currently is doing land stewardship and earthwork is on Chichenyo Ohlone land in Huichin Village. The reason why we start with giving land acknowledgements is to ground and center ourselves with the understanding that we are visitors in this territory. And not just visitors, I mean, at least for my own ancestors, I give thanks for the knowledge that they instilled in me for this ancestral work that we're doing. As an earth worker, I feel like sometimes I wonder, like, when did I start doing this? But honestly, it goes beyond my current existence on this planet. Definitely through my grandmothers and great-grandmothers, we're all farmers, all earth workers, growing food, feeding their families, feeding themselves, and understanding the importance of recognizing the remembrance that occurs while we're doing this work. Sometimes, personally, I have moments where I'm farming, after 7 hours or something, and we start this conversation with the plants where we're asking them what they need, and they're telling us what they need. And this connection is really integral to how we conceptualize earthwork, how we conceptualize farming, because it's not just this one-sided experience, it's a relational experience. And so as much as we are putting into the earth, we are also receiving that. And so giving honor and paying respect to that cycle is really key. I did just want to also just talk about the name of this panel for a second. I know it's called Urban Agriculture and Environmental Justice, but like one of my colleagues from yesterday, Jai Campbell, was talking about the importance of agroecology and understanding right now what the difference between agriculture and agroecology is. And one of the main differences is the dissemination of knowledge that the agroecological platform upholds. And as Blackearth Farms, one of our main goals is to make sure that we're not just planting food and just like, we're not going to leave the food for people to just take or anything like that. It's a process that we are undertaking in order to decolonize our understanding of our current ways of growing food. Now, as I sat here yesterday through many wonderful panels and discussions, and really just appreciated where people's perspectives were coming from, I think one word that I hadn't heard as much was talking about colonization and understanding the legacy of colonization on how we interact with food, how we interact with each other. It's not something that just happened. It's something that was intentional. Especially for me, I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm from Leimert Park, from South Central. I started doing a lot of farming out there in my own backyard, and one of the main reasons was because I grew up vegetarian. I decided to become vegan, and it was really hard to find access to organic, fresh produce anywhere, unless I was willing to drive maybe like 30 minutes, which if I don't have access to a car, that means relying on public transportation. And one of the biggest issues with living in spaces like South Central, which people a lot of times classify as a hood or a ghetto, but it's really a lot of just really where a lot of Black and brown and folks of color who have been pushed into certain areas intentionally so that there is no access to fresh and healthy foods. And so I thought to myself, if I'm growing my own food, maybe that'll help me just save a little bit of money. And I can attest to you right now, like my mom was calling me the other day and really excited about how she gets to go outside and grab chard from the garden and how much she's saving on groceries. And that's something that really, it almost made me cry because my mom suffers from type 1 diabetes. And one of the main things that's been difficult is changing her diet. She went back to school at 60 years old and decided to go through community college and she's now at Cal State Dominguez Hills getting her degree in linguistics. And I would come home and see she would have a bag of food from like McDonald's or Burger King. And it would just burn me because I'm like, Mom, don't eat Burger King, don't eat McDonald's, But she's like, I'm rushing, I don't have time. And all I can do is say, she's doing her best, And sometimes I think one of the main things that has been difficult for me through this journey is working with people with different levels of privilege in this process of earthwork. I think that the reason I do this work is to survive. I wouldn't be doing anything else because my community is constantly under attack. And I think it's important to name this because oftentimes urban farming tends to be seen as some sort of hobby or some sort of thing that's just like cute to do and take pictures of. But it's really a lifestyle. It's really a way of taking back our power, taking back our ability to sustain ourselves and sustain our communities when we have been dispossessed from the very knowledge and land that belongs to us, that belongs to everyone, but understanding that in particular, my history as an African American woman in this country, I have had to fight in order to just get certain things allowed for me to do. I think that today is an important day for us all to be in this room, for us all to be listening to many people coming from different places around the city, around the country, doing different types of work, but understanding, again, our privilege within this space. I think that a lot of the people who are suffering from climate and environmental issues are not present here. And so I think that we need to take a moment and sit with that knowledge because the people who are on the front lines of environmental injustices, again, are not in this room. And when we think about that, it's like, why are they not here? And what can we do to show up for them? What can we do to show up for me? As a member of Blackearth Farms, we are landless farmers. We don't have space to grow. We quería farm because that's the only way we can find space to use. And we've gone through people ripping up our gardens. We've gone through, fights with just trying to have access to space. And that's something that we have to do just to grow some food to nourish ourselves as we're fighting food insecurity, as we're also trying to go to school, as we're trying to show up for ourselves, as we're trying to do self-care. And so one of our collective members, Will, has a jar there, and we call that our reparations jar, mainly because one of the ways that we feel that folks with privilege can help those who do not have the same amount of privilege is by providing resources. Now, resources don't always come in the form of money, but money is appreciated, of course. But resources come in the form of allowing for space, giving space, as well as making space, talking to people, recognizing people's humanity. Recently, Blackearth Farms was part of the Mandela Resource Village pop-up, and one of the lead organizers for that, their name is Mama B, or Brandy, and one of the call and response chants that she does is she says, Kujichagulia, and then people respond with self-determination. And Kujichagulia is the second principle of Kwanzaa. If anyone knows about Kwanzaa, it's a holiday celebrated by African Americans in the U.S. to reconnect with our West African heritage. And the importance of self-determination is realizing that something was taken. That recognition that something was taken is the beginning of understanding what the responsibility of people who have more privilege, understanding where you can step in and provide resources, provide space, provide assistance. It's not a fight that we can do on our own. It's something that, stepping into spaces like this where folks like me are not necessarily as largely represented, that's something that can be scary. But one of the most important things is having the support of a collective, having the support of chosen family as well as blood family, coming into these spaces so that our voices are heard, so that we're no longer silenced, so that we're no longer erased. As much as we have to reiterate our existence, that in itself is part of not just our daily understanding, but it's part of who we are. And so that's why I'm here. That's why many of my collective members and I continue to do the work that we do, so that we're creating a legacy. We're living in cities that are not made for us, not built for us, and we're finding soil, we're finding plants, we're finding some semblance of salvation to hold on to. So I'd like to just finish off by saying Kuji Chagalia, and if you could all respond self-determination, I'd really appreciate that. Kuji Chagalia. Self-determination. Kuji Chagalia. Self-determination. Kuji Chagalia. Self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and your hearts and your passion and your determination. It's been an honor to hear from you all and a privilege. We do have a few minutes for questions, right, Hannah? Or no? Yeah? A few minutes? Mm-hmm. Jabril?
So the question was, how did Zapotepec gain access to the land that we are using? That's a great question. So on the topic of reparations, it was actually a community member who is also of indigenous descent, who is a doctor. So in terms of resources, she has them, and she shares the same beliefs and visions, and so it's a lended space. And we are, of course, on the topic of, land, just, getting land and what that means, or reclaiming land. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the question was if I could expand on the what is called Pueblo food experience. That's actually a book. So if you do want to get the full story on it, a highly recommended book. So the Pueblo food experience documents the time frame of about 3 months when a community of folks from the Pueblo people out in New Mexico, Tezuque, New Mexico, after having ate, the colonial diet all their life, McDonald's, res food, if anybody is familiar with that, that's another topic. But so just, really terrible health conditions, and then the commitment to only eat their traditional foods before colonialism and contact came about. was put on the table. So it's kind of like a challenge for all of them. And it was a communal effort. So they went through with it together and they had the results, before and after. So they got physical exams, blood work, all the modern technologies that we have in the healthcare industry today. So they actually documented all of that. And of course, as I mentioned, the results were great. They lost weight. They, beat the hypertension, high cholesterol. Their diabetes, of course, symptoms were managed a lot better. So it's a lot of the lifestyle diseases that are brought about with our foodways, food systems in our modern times that, of course, are creating all of those diseases. So it was a really awesome experience to go to one of the members' houses, Roxanne. So she is one of the authors of the book. So Pueblo Food Experience, if you want to get the full details on that. Thank you.
So I think we're at time now, but I encourage everyone, Sure. This is for Minkah.
Well, just on the reparations tip, it's about access. Like we were talking about, there's a lot of things, a lot of ways that the systems that we live in are set up that remove access from certain people. And so how do we bring those resources to folks so that they are able to stimulate their self-determination? Now, in my case, I was able to know some people who had access to tools, and I needed tools to start my garden in my backyard. And so I was reaching out to people like, hey, do you have soil? Do you have compost? Do you have, and asking my community members, because I was looking for organizations in my neighborhood that may provide those things for folks looking to start gardens in their backyard. And many of them did not have resources or didn't even know what I was looking for or talking about. And so I had to just look in my community to find that people were on the same tip. And so that just brings it back to looking at the people who are already there, because a lot of folks in our communities are wanting the same things that we need, especially in terms of reparations. And so starting that conversation so that we can begin to form this communal consciousness and understand that a lot of our tools do lie within us. And then with that people power, we can reach out to other resources by just having access to other information about who may have what. The other question that you asked was college. So I did go to college. I graduated from UC Berkeley in 2018. But to be transparent though, going to UC Berkeley and studying environmental sciences was difficult as a woman of color, because I faced a lot of injustices with my professors, with other students, getting them to first and foremost acknowledge me. And this is really putting into perspective the fact that white supremacy, racism, colorism, anti-blackness are prevalent in all of our communities, and there's no way of getting around it. And even though UC Berkeley is a very, lauded liberal school, there are a lot of incongruencies, just like anywhere else you go. I do want to say that there are a lot of books we can read that we can get a lot of the same knowledge from. And so one of the things that we're working in our collective to do now is creating a very comprehensive library, so that way we can begin to learn these things from people who look like us, who have been where we are, and who we can relate to. So that way the knowledge is not just locked in the ivory towers of the university, but it's in our hands, on the ground, in the streets, in the soil.
Thank you so much, everyone, and I encourage you to come talk to these speakers and also find Will in the reparations jar. Okay,